Everyone is looking for Jesus, and he's nowhere to be found. That's the dilemma that we have in today's gospel. So I want to present to you with that in mind 3 questions today. Are you looking for Jesus? Where are you looking for Jesus? And why are you looking for Jesus? So first, are you looking for Jesus? The author G.K. Chesterton once said this: "The man who knocks on the door of a brothel is looking for God." Sounds a little counterintuitive, doesn't it? What he means is that the one who is seeking fulfillment of his pleasures, even the most surface level desires that you and I have, are actually seeking the deepest longings of the human heart, which only God can satisfy. G.K. Chesterton was writing over 100 years ago, and so we might not relate to that example as much. But what about today's temptations? When you're about to click on something online that you know may not be good for you, you're looking for God. When you're about to cope with stress, with food or alcohol or drugs, we're looking for God. When we're about to spend hours a day scrolling on our phone, we're looking for God. Those are examples, of course, of things that we know are not so great for us. But what about the things that are good for us? Like focusing on your job and doing well in it. Or maybe providing for your children. Or trying to figure out where to go to school. More often than not, those good things that we seek make us restless and agitated, worried and uneasy. Are you looking for God there? We just heard from the first reading in the book of Job. If in bed I say, when shall I arise? Then the night drags on. I'm filled with restlessness until the dawn. Restlessness, busyness, activity, worry. You and I are so often engaged in restless activity, keeping us occupied because we're searching for happiness and peace. You may not be explicitly looking for God, but implicitly you're looking for the fulfillment of your deepest desires, which is a void that only God can occupy. It's the God-sized hole that's in our heart. And more often than not, we're looking to the wrong places to fill that hole. Which brings us to question number 2. Where are you looking for Jesus? In the gospel, Jesus has just finished a long day. He's cured Simon's mother-in-law. He drove out demons. He's healed the sick. And he's probably exhausted after all that. Now, the next morning, he could have slept in. But it says, rising very early before dawn, he left and went off to a deserted place where he prayed. Everyone's looking for Jesus. They're in a frenzy because they want to see him. They want him to be busy and to do more stuff. But Jesus is not an activist functionary. He's not a workaholic, and he doesn't need constant stimulation. Instead, Jesus opts for prayer and silence. In a response to a very busy time of tremendous activity and over-the-top productivity, Jesus' approach looks very different from yours and mine. When you and I get busy, when we have lots of things on our plate, when the stress and anxiety is piling on, what do? The first thing that normally goes out the window is quiet, solitude, and prayer. After a busy, stressful day, what do? We grab some snacks, we watch Netflix, we stick in our AirPods, and we scroll on our phone. But that's not what Jesus does. Instead, Jesus escapes from all of that. No iPhone, no Netflix, no music. And he simply goes off by himself to pray with his heavenly Father. If Jesus, the Son of God, thought that he needed prayer, the busier and more stressed out he got, then how much more do you and I need it, weak as we are? There's an obvious problem, though. It's that you and I do not like silence and boredom. Because over time, the more addicted we become to our screens and our electronic devices, the more aversion we have to silence and a lack of stimulation. In fact, some people would prefer pain over boredom. Recently, a few years ago, a research team did an experiment on young adults, and you got placed in a room by yourself for 15 minutes, just to sit quietly with your thoughts. What they found was most people had a very unpleasant experience sitting alone with their thoughts. So they took it to the next level and they did the experiment again. But instead, this time, they added something. So if you wanted, in the 15 minutes you were sitting alone, you could press a button and get an electric shock that would give you pain. And what they found was that in this experiment, 2/3 of the men in the study chose to shock themselves and experience pain rather than sit quietly with their thoughts. They were so uncomfortable being bored that being shocked was more entertaining and enjoyable. It's a lot harder to find God out there, on the iPhone and money and food and constant stimulation, than to find God in here, in the silence of your own heart. But that's where Jesus is. That's where he goes off to the silence, in prayer with his heavenly Father. So are you looking for Jesus? Where are you looking for Jesus? And lastly, why are you looking for Jesus? Why do most people pray? If you were to ask anybody, presuming that most Americans at some time pray in their life, why do they pray? Usually it's to get something. If you need something, you pull God off the shelf and say, all right, Lord, can you come through for me right now? Please cure this sickness that I have. Please bring my kids back to the church. Please let me ace this test. Please help my team win the game. That's probably why the people in the story today are looking for Jesus. They want to see him do more stuff. We got more sick people we got to bring to him. But notice, up until this point, they have not found Jesus. He's still off praying by himself. And when Simon Peter and the others finally come across and discover Jesus and say, everybody's looking for you, what does Jesus respond? Of course, he doesn't say, I got to finish my prayer. He says, let us go into the surrounding villages that I may preach there as well. For this purpose I have come. Not let me go, let's go. Let us, you are coming with me. We hear in the Gospel of Mark chapter 3, Jesus appointed 12, whom he also named apostles. Why? So that they might be with him, first of all, and second, that he might send them forth to preach. If you and I are going to be God's instruments, we have to spend time with him before he can send us out. Before you get busy, you got to spend quiet time with your Heavenly Father. Why do you and I pray? Why do we look for Jesus? Is it so that he can fix your problems and mine, or so that you can simply be with him? The purpose of prayer is not to get things from God, it's to get God, so that now, afterward, you can do great things. Notice how it is only after Jesus prays that he's able to go and preach and do all the great things that he does. Because the richness of his external ministry, all the great things that he does, flows from the richness of his internal life with his Heavenly Father. And that's the dynamic core of what prayer really is. It's the infinite power of a loving Father who has dove into your life, seeped into your heart. And that's the engine of Jesus' life, so to speak, is that he is the Son of God. And in prayer, he goes back to it every day. And that's what gives him the power and the joy and the purpose of his ministry. And for me and you too, the silence and quiet with God is what will give you and me the purpose, the joy and the drive to do what we need to do. Because without that, we're just going to be activist functionaries. And our heart's not going to be totally with it. So how do we do this practically? How do we go to that quiet place where only God is? I recommend for all of us that we find the quiet space in our life each day. If you have a bunch of kids, I can't relate to that, but maybe you can find the quiet place. For me, it's early in the morning where I take off and I head to the chapel where it's quiet and dark, where I can be with God. For everybody here, it's going to look different. But find the place where it's just you and God. No phone, no music, no TV, no distractions. Just you and your Heavenly Father. Take the restlessness that you have, subdue that restlessness, train that restlessness, so that now you can experience the true rest of being in the presence of God.